Okay, this is Marco with Tornapartmedia, and I'm here with Lord Kaiju from Oxygen Destroyer. So yeah, I mean, this is a big deal because honestly, this is fucking first video interview that he's ever done. This is him in the flesh. In 10 years that the band's been around, and so I wanted to sort of touch on that a little bit. So again, it's been 10 years since you started this band, and coincidentally, 10 years ago, Godzilla 2014 was released. And so I kind of wanted to know if that had something to do with like the conception of the band, or was it just like a coincidence?
Yeah, you know, when that movie came out, it definitely, I think it definitely reignited my enthusiasm. Like, I've always loved this stuff, but yeah, going 10 years without a new Godzilla movie was pretty rough. Yeah. I remember there was a time when it really seemed like there wasn't going to be any more movies. Final Wars really felt like the end. And I remember when that 2014 movie came out, it was like the biggest deal ever. You know, I saw it opening night twice in a row. Yeah. I remember seeing it at the midnight release, and I loved it so much, I immediately saw it again. Like,
you just walked out and walked right back in?
Yeah, I was just so stoked. And during that time, I was playing guitar, and I wanted to start a thrash metal band, you know. And then I was thinking of an idea. I was thinking of, you know, like starting a thrashy death metal band, and I was trying to decide on the concept and the lyrics of what I'd sing about. And then I thought about it, and I realized that a lot of metal bands sing about zombies, Vikings, and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. But I noticed there weren't a lot of bands singing about kaiju films, and I was really surprised about that because I feel like giant monster movies are metal as fuck, you know? What's more metal than giant monsters blowing things up?
Yeah.
And, so I just thought that was what I should do. And I did a quick Google search to see if the name Oxygen Destroyer was taken. And when I saw it wasn't, it was kind of an epiphany, you know?
It was perfect.
Like, it was like, oh my God, this is my destiny. And so I did it, I started it, and my whole goal from the start was just to see where it would go, and it's definitely gone farther than I ever thought it would.
Yeah. And so, you know, speaking now back to the present, Godzilla X Kong, Godzilla Kong, I don't know, the new Empire, whatever the fuck, it just came out, and it's been doing really well in the box office. And, you know, I feel like we're in the middle of this like kaiju resurgence. There's all kinds of new independent movies coming out, and so I wanted to know if like that resurgence in popularity for kaiju like also affected the popularity of the band, because like you said, there's really not many bands. Like if you look up kaiju themed death metal, you'll pop up like almost like at the beginning. So like have you noticed a shift in like your fan base because of the movies?
Yeah, I think this resurgence has definitely brought in a whole new wave of fans. You know, it seems like more than ever, people are really starting to realize how awesome these movies are, finally. And, that might have played a role in the band's success. I've definitely met a lot of people who've listened to our music and had never seen the movies before, but then became fans because they dug our music. Yeah. And I've also met people who were kaiju nerds, but not metal fans, and they're into metal now because of us too. And that kind of stuff really blows me away.
Yeah. I feel like I always try to like spread the kaiju agenda. Like I'll show people like a kaiju band. Also like there's this band that's also kaiju themed metal, and that usually is like, oh shit, that's cool. The most excited question that I've been telling you not to tell me for the past like I don't know like month that we've been talking. What was your first introduction to like kaiju and Godzilla?
Oh boy, so I was 5 years old and I was obsessed with dinosaurs. I still am. And I was at a library one day with my mom, and she found a VHS copy of the original King Kong versus Godzilla. So she rented that for me thinking I would enjoy it, and she had no idea what she started that day. I mean, I was obsessed with that movie. It was the coolest shit I'd ever seen. You know, when you're 5 years old, seeing a giant monkey beating the shit out of a giant radioactive dinosaur, it's just the craziest thing, you know. And then after that, I just needed more. So my parents would start taking me to video stores every week, and that's how I found, you know, more Godzilla movies, more Kong movies, more monster movies in general. It's how I really got into like old black and white sci-fi films. And, you know, that's the thing. Like, discovering Godzilla and Kong would also lead to me discovering stuff like Gorgo and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and Gamera. I remember the first Godzilla movie I ever owned was the original Mothra versus Godzilla, and I was obsessed with that film. I mean, I was watching it every single day. I was like 5 years old and building giant Lego buildings and knocking them over during the destruction scenes.
Yeah.
It was, I love that movie. That's one of my favorite ones. So I think that one definitely played the biggest role, you know, but the original King Kong versus Godzilla is definitely what started it all.
Yeah, that's interesting because for me, since I sort of grew up in the period where there was like no kaiju movies coming out, when I was born like a year before the Godzilla 98 movie came out, the American one. And I know you hate that movie. You made a whole song saying fuck that movie. But that was like the only exposure I had at that point because there was no other like really physical media or like there wasn't many reruns of the movies. So I just watched that shit like over and over again. I had it in VHS and like just again over and over again. And I had like this Godzilla toy that wasn't even based on that movie, but I was just like obsessed with it. And then the Peter Jackson Kong movie came out, and then I became obsessed with that one. And eventually 2014 was like my gateway into like the rest of Godzilla because I watched it and I was just like, oh shit, like I want to know more. Like I wanted to learn about. I have this thing where if I get into something, like I just go back and watch everything in order.
I totally
and so with that in mind, obviously there's a lot more kaiju than just Godzilla. So what is like your favorite like underrated or more unknown like kaiju movies? You can name a few. There's a lot.
Oh man, it's a tough choice. Well, I really love the 90s Gamera trilogy. Those are my favorite movies of all time. I also really like Pulgasari, which is a North Korean kaiju film. The story behind the making of it's totally ridiculous, too. I also really like Them and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Those aren't, like, super obscure, but I think they're essential. I like those a lot. And I also really like Orochi, the Eight-Headed Dragon. It's made by the same crew that made the special effects for the Heisei Godzilla films. What else? Oh, I like the Daimajin films a lot, too. Samurai-era kaiju movies. I like those a lot.
Yeah, I've seen the first one, and I have, like, the Arrow video. And I have the rest of them, but I haven't gotten around to them.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. But I was going to say, that Pulgasari movie, it's on YouTube, by the way. You can find it for free. But there's, like, a scene in that, and, like, the whole movie is just, like, kind of shitty. Like, because I don't know what scan of film they used. Like, it's just, like, burnt. And, like, the audio, every time they fight with the swords, it's just like, cling, cling. Like, over and over again, it sounds awful. But there's, like, a scene in it where you can see, like, Pulgasari, like, in the distance. And you literally cannot tell if it's, like, real or, like, a movie set or something. Because just, like, the way that it's, like, composed. Like, that building just looks, like, real. Like, the scale looks, like, real. So I always tell people, like, watch that fucking movie. It's good. It's communist, but also, like, not. It's crazy.
Yeah, I really like the miniatures in that film, and the suit looks great. And, just the story behind the making of it's crazy. You know, like, they captured a South Korean film director and forced him to make movies. And that was the last movie he made before him and his wife escaped to America.
And then they like kidnapped, I think, the Heisei movie crew also, right?
I know that the suit actor for Godzilla in the Heisei films was also the suit actor for Pulgasari himself.
But now moving on from the kaiju influences a little bit, I want to talk about your musical influences. If you can name like 2 bands for each album so far that like kind of like influenced those albums, I like to know about that because each album sounds like a little bit different, and I see like a difference. I just want to know like what influenced each one.
The first album was definitely Vader inspired, very Vader influenced, especially Ultimate Incantation, Litany, stuff like that. And then the second album had a little bit more of that, but there was also some Repulsion influence, especially on the B side. And the upcoming third album takes a lot of influence from Protector and just Teutonic thrash in general. That's another big influence. Creator, especially like Pleasure to Kill era stuff. That's always been a huge influence on our sound.
So by the time that this interview goes up, the big announcement will be revealed. So you want to talk more about the next album?
Yeah, so our upcoming third album, Guardian of the Universe. It's the album I've dreamed of making since I started this band almost 10 years ago. It's a concept album based on the Heisei Gamera trilogy. They're my favorite movies of all time. I've always wanted to do an album that pays tribute to those three specific films, and I'm really glad it's finally happening. I strongly believe it's our fastest, deadliest, and most epic album ever. I did my best to do those movies justice.
Yeah, I remember we were talking about just how difficult it was to sort of like write those songs because of the pressure you put on yourself to make like a really good movie. Yeah, those movies are amazing. I always tell any person that's into kaiju to watch those movies specifically. And Gamera 2 specifically is my favorite one. It's a scene where Gamera fucking flies in and slides and shoots fire at the Legion. That shit like altered my brain chemistry. For the rest of my life. So check that movie out. Last thing, you want to shout out any other bands from your local scene or other kaiju themed bands before we go?
Yeah, oh man, there's so many good bands on our scene. A few I'll name off the top of my head are Fetid, Petrification, Torture, Witch Vomit, Mortiferum, Disease, Command, Ghost Blood.
That's like your whole scene.
I really like the Pacific Northwest a lot. There's so many bands. I know I'm forgetting some right now. It's like I could list dozens of bands.
Any kaiju themes specifically?
I do know some really good kaiju themed bands like Kaiju Daisenso. They're really sick. We did a split EP with them a few years ago. And there's also a really good kaiju themed like psychedelic doom rock band called Sons of Gizora. They're really cool. And the band Cyanide, they've got a handful of songs based on kaiju films. In fact, as far as I know, I think they're the first death metal band ever that had songs about kaiju movies, like the song Mountains and Thunders about Godzilla, the song Death Machines about Mechagodzilla, and they've also got the song Wrath of Daimajin.
So what is your most controversial kaiju movie opinion?
Well, let me think. I guess mine would be that I'm not a big fan of Godzilla King of the Monsters. A lot of people really seem to like that one a lot, and I do like the MonsterVerse movies overall, but that one in particular kind of let me down. I didn't really like the human characters that much, and the fight scenes were kind of underwhelming. And, I was just so stoked because, it was going to be Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, and Ghidorah in a movie together again, and it just, I don't know, it wasn't what I was hoping it would be. But I loved Godzilla vs. Kong, and I liked the latest one, too. I feel like they more than made up for that movie. And to that movie's credit, it sets up those two films, and it does have a really, really good soundtrack. So, despite my distaste for it, it's not like it's the worst thing ever. It has its moments.
I actually remember I had another question about, there's a lot of discourse about like the validity of like silly and serious kaiju movies, and I kind of wanted to know like your take on that. Like, where do you sit? Because I think there's some people that as soon as the kaiju movies get like a little too silly, they're just like, they're out of it. Like, they just don't care anymore, and they only care for like the original or like -1.
My favorite kaiju films are definitely the serious ones. Like, off the top of my head, I think some of my like top 10 favorites are definitely the original 1954 Godzilla, Godzilla -1, the original Mothra and Rodan movies, and the Gamera trilogy definitely. But that being said, I still love the silly stuff, too. I love all the goofy ones, like Godzilla vs. Megalon. I also enjoy Gappa a lot. Gappa's kind of a silly one, but I really like that.
I think I've seen that one.
Gappa's a good time. Kind of a similar story to Gorgo.
Oh, okay.
Baby monster gets captured and the parents get
pissed off. Is it one of like the Western like kaiju movies?
It's a Japanese one.
Oh, it's a Japanese one. I'll have to check it out. I don't think I ever heard of that one.
It's got some good destruction scenes.
Yeah. The last thing I also wanted to touch on was like there's actually a lot of really cool kaiju comics. Like IDW has been putting out some really good stuff. There's like a whole comic book series that is a sequel to the original King Kong movie, like the 33 movie, and it follows the whole story. And it was like, what's the word? Like, it was given its blessing from the original creator and like writers.
I haven't read that.
Yeah, so I'll just send this to you.
That
But just,
sounds
I don't think you know. Like, there's a lot of good kaiju shit in the comics world, and I'm surprised there's not been more like word outside of it. Like, I have shout out Kamikaze Comics in Claremont. They always hook me up with all the kaiju shit there. But yeah, just so you know, and I'll give you some after.
Sounds good. Some of my favorite Godzilla comics are the original Dark Horse Godzilla and Gamera comics. I have every issue. I grew up reading those when I was a kid. I really enjoy them.
Nice. Well, that's it for us. I'm really excited to hear the new album. If you check out Underworld 619's video, you can hear the new songs because they played the whole set was all new music, so you can get a sneak peek. But anyway, that's it from us. Was Marco, and this is Lord Kaiju, and the Hail the Kaiju.
Hail the fucking kaiju.